own way. This one began with a childhood passion for Indians. It was acquired in the usual way, picked up on the playground in the 1940s and 1950s when the game of cowboys and Indians enjoyed a last flowering. Hopalong Cassidy, Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, and the Lone Ranger were predictable staples of kids' television, in my view, but the game itself, played with cap pistols across suburban backyards, invited somebody to take the part of the Indians. From the beginning, I thought cowboys dull, Indians mysterious, compelling, and something that did not fit easily into the game. Their road had been a hard one. Kids have quick sympathies, and mine took shape early. My father helped them form with the books he gave me, which went beyond the usual fare. I still own a lot of the books that kept me up late when I was 12 and 13. James Willard Schultz's My Life as an Indian, Marie Sandoz's Cheyenne Autumn, Edward I. Stewart's Custer's Luck. They gave me a lifelong appetite for the particular and a solid grasp of certain truths. One was the fact that the Indian Wars were about land, and specifically about removal of Indians from land that whites wanted. Another was the existence of sorrow and tragedy in history, loss and pain that cannot be redeemed. That was not the way I would have put it at the time, but I got the central idea clearly enough. By the time I was 14, I understood that the treatment of Indians was something people did not like to describe plainly. Then I grew up. I quit reading about Indians and was caught up by other sorrows, tragedies, and moral complexities. I became a reporter and moved from one subject to another in a progression that always seemed to make sense. The anti-war movement was the first thing I wrote about seriously. From that, I learned something about intelligence organizations and wanted to know more. Study of that, in its turn, brought me to the history of nuclear weapons, and eventually I was promoted to wonder why the Germans in World War II failed to build an atomic bomb of their own. Each of these subjects involved much that was hidden, and each absorbed years of work. That was the personal history I brought to Crow Agency in 1994 when my brother and I decided to spend a couple of days at the Little Bighorn battlefield. The voice of William Garnett thus found a ready listener. What he said prompted many questions. I hadn't thought about Indians for decades, but Garnett brought me back around. Nothing quite opens up history like an event, the interplay of a large cast pushing a conflict to a moment of decision. It is the event that gives history its narrative backbone. Very often the excavation of an event can reveal the whole of an era, just as an archaeologist's trench through a corner of an ancient city can bring back to light a forgotten civilization. But I confess it was wanting to know why Crazy Horse was killed, not the abstract lessons to be drawn from his fate, that drew me on. It's my working theory that pinning down what happened is always the first step to understanding why it happened. That's where the appetite for the particular comes in, the who, what, and when. Those who watched or took part in Crazy Horse's killing seemed to understand immediately that something troubling had occurred, but the public's interest ended with a week of newspaper stories. No official called at the time for a public accounting, and none was made. Histories of the Great Sioux War have treated the killing as regrettable but forgettable, something between a footnote and an afterthought. The event itself remained obscure, muffled, sketchily recorded. In the histories, William Garnett was typically given a sentence or two, if his role was noted at all. But in the decades after the killing, witnesses and participants occasionally published a memoir or spoke to a reporter or, like Garnett, answered the questions of a researcher. In 1942, Marie Sandoz gathered much of this material into her Life of Crazy Horse, which I somehow missed in childhood. I was prompted to read it by William Garnett. Sandoz's book has more art, but not as many facts as Kingsley Bray's now authoritative biography of the chief. The sound of Garnett's voice was the small beginning of my own effort